our resource speaker for today hails from Vietnam and is a very active colleague at the International Partnership for the Satoyama Initiative we call IPSI. It is a global initiative based in Japan to sustainably manage human activities in socio-ecological production landscapes and seascapes, more popularly known as Satoyama and Satomi, respectively. This Satoyama approach has been approved as a global strategy for conservation during the 10th meeting of the Conference of the Parties of the Convention on Biological Diversity. If I remember it right, I first met our speaker in a global meeting in Korea, and annually since then in various countries where IPSI was held until the pandemic came and sadly disrupted IPSI face-to-face conventions. We are very grateful to our speaker for being with us today. Our resource speaker is a graduate from the Australian National University for her Bachelor of Science in Geography and Environmental Management, and for her Master of Science in Forestry Science and Management. Currently, she is actively involved in action research and biodiversity conservation in Human Ecology Practical Area, or HEPA, Eco-Farming School. Since 2006, she has worked for Social Policy Ecology Research Institute in Hanoi, Vietnam, and she is responsible for research and development and publications for the Community Entrepreneur Development Institute. Her commitment to action research, action training, and advocacy is to strengthen local initiatives and traditional wisdom in forest use and governance, empowerment, and skills enhancement for indigenous minority youths towards ecological farming, forest protection, biodiversity conservation, and ecosystem rehabilitation, all essential for the sustainable management of socio-ecological production landscapes and seascapes in Vietnam. For this, she maintains a very strong network addressing different thematic issues, particularly in Southeast Asian region. I am sure her experiences will be very relevant in the management of the Philippine versions of socio-ecological production landscapes and seascapes. Indeed, it is an honor and a great privilege to have her as one of our speakers in our webinar series. Friends, please join me in welcoming our very active, very charming resource speaker, Ms. Kien Dang.
I thank Dr. Buet, and as I said, among the COVID-19 impacts, so having this series of webinars, sharing and learning, and especially targeting on addressing the question of restoring the landscape, the species, biodiversity, and how do we, going forward, not just as a single nation, but across nations, sharing and learning towards a restoration and living close and better harmonious with the nature. I'm thankful for your invitation. Let me share in a more natural way. So, as I said, I am not a biologist myself. I'm a forester. So largely, I look at things in a bigger picture. I first met in my master's degree. I met this young girl as well, very charming. Her name is Ayako-san from Japan. So she first introduced me to so-called landscape in the term Satoyama or Satoyumi. Dr. Buet, probably through his lecture in the Philippines, maybe introduced to you what that means in terms of landscape. But the core concept is around how do we have the kind of landscape that be harmoniously between the human system and the nature system. There's some beautiful landscape picture from Japan, probably from the Philippines, in your rural areas. Same like in Southeast Asian country like Vietnam, or Laos or Cambodia. But at the time, in my master's degree, I had previous was my bachelor degree and accompanied with internship and working experience. And I traveled in many landscapes in the rural, and I found a number of challenges. Greenery landscape, a beautiful species and very long, worthwhile genetic pool of rare species called mother trees in the back olden days. But now they've been turning to almost different type of form of landscape, so-called agriculture. The term slash and burn agriculture need to be revisited in a different seminar. But here I mean, in Vietnam, I would say I'm critical about an area being of a forest, now turning to, let's say, a commercial crop type of landscape. And I can take an instance like cassava monocrop. And if the cassava monocropping system means no biological value. And with cassava monocrop, and in Vietnam, I'm critical as well about Vietnamese farmers, where they also put additional spraying of herbicides, chemical fertilizer onto this landscape. So almost you are killing the landscape from used to be a highly biodiverse forest landscape and to now an area of no biological landscape, because they're seeking of agricultural profit, maybe 3 years time, 5 years time, 10 years time. Some of the landscape forests being turned into monoculture of, let's say, acacia. I think you know acacia plantation. You also know eucalyptus plantation. You also will probably know pines plantations. So in fact, we used to have this multiple purpose, and forest is a home, is an ecosystem, is itself embedded multiple value, from ecosystem value to spiritual value, watershed value, etc., etc. And now carbon value as well, embedded within a tree. Now you're turning into a monoculture type, whether it is a dominant species of acacia because it has a commercial value for paper production and paper industry, to other things like cassava crop, maybe for biofuel and other sort of things. So the competition over the landscape is a challenge. Or as a forester, and also looking at bigger picture, what do we see in this sort of picture we see? So we see forest landscape already now being clear for agriculture. But on top of that, this is an instant when we travel in Laos, in northern Laos, we see soil erosion became an issue. Where there's no trees and no cover crop and mulching of the topsoil layer, I think much of this topsoil layer without being protected, we lose almost this very fertile soil organic matter on top of it. And I have learned recently also from more soil scientist background, if we're looking at to build 1 centimeter of the soil, we needed almost 500 years to get it back to under the good natural condition. And often forest ecosystem help itself as a nature, providing this fertility to the soil without any need to invest chemical fertilizer or additional agricultural input. So what's striking me in my mind is why would we having this distraction over times in my travel account when I see through my eyes? What do we see in terms of global challenge? Because when we talk about Satuyama as a landscape, this is a dream, not only Vietnam, Japan, Philippines, maybe younger generation, scholar and stakeholder. We want to rebuild, restore the kind of landscape so-called bring it back closely between human and nature interaction. But at the same time, we see this kind of global challenge that we're facing. Apparently, I just quoted from this global partnership of forest landscape restoration. We have an opportunity. We have a challenge, but that challenge should be turning into an opportunity. What do we see? We have 2 billion hectares to work with, and I know this is huge. Satoyama is one little niche kind of example, an ideology promoted by Japan, but I think it can spread across the countries where we see how do we restore and how do we turn from opportunity, from difficulties to opportunity for restoring it. 2 billion hectares need to be restored with a forest. I have quickly quoting this, I couldn't remember how I came about this, but it's been long ago with all the work, but financing forest landscape restoration, they used to have this an overview of, let's say, what do we want to see? Because we should not talk just from a short-term perspective day to day. We should have a vision, yeah? Vietnam, Philippines alike, and Thailand. To achieve the landscape, we need a vision of up to now, 2022. Then what do we want to see in 2030, 2050? That's a long journey to take. Just like a tree, it will take 10 to 15 years to grow, like a human. So we did this restoration goal. You could see for yourself, Philippines apparently quoted 2.4 million hectares by 2028. Vietnam, we have to do a lot more than you. 4.6 million hectares by 2030. We have destructing and destroying many landscapes within our country. So we have therefore just actively working, how do we achieve that? There's many other programs, not just our program. I wear my hat because I joined a couple of NGOs, not just SPERI, but now currently is an acting deputy director for SPERI. But the key action when we see in this long journey, we specifically in this seminar, I will talk about the restoration of forests, and that's the restoration of so-called, I work from local seeds, a restoration, building up nursery locally with different grassroots community, turning into those local seedlings, and then continuous on promoting planting activities across the landscape in mixed species, mixed local species planting. So basically, it falls under key action number 2 of our institute, and we work collaboratively with stakeholders, not yet with university, Dr. Buwat, but I thank to you, yeah, this opened up a very new opportunity, thinking about how do we collaborate with students, professorship, doctorate degree, and working on that. And this is the very first time I convey such speech from your invitation. So basically in this key action that we define, so we have kind of a 4 sub strategy or approach. So number 1, we start firstly with the seeds collection and restoration. It's very tough because normally we tend to go to buy commercial seeds available. So it's a hardcore. If I date it back to 2015, because it's almost 2022 by now, to actually raise the first thinking in mind. We go into the forest, look at the seasonal calendar of the trees and the mother trees, and try to collect those seeds from good mother trees, yeah? And then collecting home and then try to turn into the nursery. So seed restoration by local knowledge and practices was one of our key approach, and is continuing on over the years. We also follow the seed restoration. We have set up nursery, another a company to help later on in year 2, year 3. We engage in tree planting on the landscape level. So in trees planting, we follow that model of mixed species planting, never monocrop any further. After defining an area that we could do with planting, we do tree planting. The number three, I think as an introductory part, we closely work with local communities in many regions. And I apparently engage in many youth sector, kids, as well as in school and local groups. I apologize for not cleaning up this sort of slide, but this is where after each action, very small and little initiative, we try to also document it. And this is documentation. We simply use so-called the Google Mind Maps. We define it into a so-called restoration of land and an ecosystem through a platform. And we have divided into between farmers, because some of the support going directly to farmers, some going to groups of farmers, some going to larger community level on the landscape. So basically this slide indicate and show you, we try to document every single effort, every drop of the effort from farmer level to the community level on a map. So therefore it's also helping us easier attracting a supporting scheme, Dr. Beward. Because without documentation of real action, you don't see change over the time. So we wanted to document it to see the change from the year 2015 or maybe to the later year. Over the years, as a practical person and a practical activist, we have tried at least, this is still not a full list, apologize for lack of time to give a full report to you, but we try to tracking smallholder projects and also community project. So over the years, we have only succeed around 40 hectares of planting with local from seed to seedlings to tree planting. And with a plan, you normally have a plan in mind, and then you have to also calculate on reality how much actual planting you could actually conduct. So we only achieve roughly 40,000 or 42,000 of the tree planting over many years. But interestingly, maybe of the last 7 years, I thank to my colleagues, farmers, youth group, we have succeeded to manage at least raising the significance of local species, of local indigenous species across Vietnam and Laos. So per initiative, we targeting from 4 to 5 local indigenous species that have to get to the maximum. And we also try to watch and observing the survival rate. Not all the time we success to 100%, everybody. We could only achieve like up to 60, 70%, and continuous planting, continuous restoration effort, promoting the conservation need to be investing in time, in human resource, in also in knowledge. I'm taking an example here in one of the landscape in central Vietnam. HEPA was one of the first pilot we tried, and from there we spreading all across Vietnam. So it used to be also an area very bare. I couldn't find a better photo to show you before and after in terms of changes. I have other map to show you later, but at least in HEPA and another farm that we try to put in 5 different tree species and try to calculate over the amount of planting and capturing the tree growth. I have also extending from HEPA when I see, oh, there's a chance back in the 2015, we could do that. So I try to introduce that concept to other community of indigenous group in Central Highland of Vietnam. And these are all the tree species of local terms, but we largely focus on a couple of things. I think in scientific called Magnoliaceae, you know that species? Michelia tonkinensis is a species variety. And then because when we interact with the local community, we try to mobilize. Well, first thing is we try to learn what is a local species available, relevant for daily life. So these are the species not only used for wood, for timber, but they are species also valuable for their alcohol, because the leaf of the tree is one of the important ingredients to actually for fermentation later on and to make into a very unique taste of the local wine. There's some other species rather on, we're focusing on fruit, local fruit crops. So this is an example of Viola community in SPERI commune in Central Highland back in the 2018. From one thing, it went on another thing. So from one village, then other village also expressed their interest to also doing exactly the same. So I was very grateful to continue seeing this sort of little dot going and spreading all over, and was also be able to obtain just very genuine support from friends and colleagues and supporter to continuously helping these young female and male, setting up other nursery. They're also focusing from cafe, different jackfruit, wild jackfruit, wild mangosteen, wild guava, and wild orange to try out. And that this kind of action in the nursery continues since 2016 up to now. This is another example where I work with this young gentleman here, but gradually this landscape of acacia plantations have now mixed. They reduce the pruning and cutting, reduce the density from acacia plantation, but they now intermix with other species, particularly if you are aware, Michelia tonkinensis, Chakracea tabularis, some of the species that give quite a valuable from seeds to wood to incense for the local villagers. So there's a certain incentive seeing how you move from acacia normally just for paper and it goes through industry. Now they wanted to see more other species giving that better value materialistically and probably to all higher income for the farmers in central Vietnam. This is another case that we work in Laos, in Luang Prabang province, and this is called Nut Bạc region. So there they also had an issue with rubber plantation and a few other things that are from rubber plantation causing to the landscape. So I started also just interacting individually and group of young farmers in that region. So they expressed interest in, they wanted to restore a few species around bamboo varieties and some other species that give very high value, great called incense flavor and high market value for Laos farmers. We also integrate some of the herbal. I do not have a top of my mind called sanyan This is the one, my mouse. Yeah, this is a very, very valuable shade lover herbal species that go under the forest. It also helps farmers to find some income in between. So from 6 months, they already can harvest, both either dry or fresh. And in Vietnam or Laos, we can easily sell to China. So we also start integrate some herbal into the landscape. Yeah, this is a rubber plantation, but start gradually because that rubber value going down, and at the same time, they're seeing more the need to diversify their income. So therefore, some of these areas, they started planting other both fruit trees and wild timber trees onto that landscape. The way we work, Dr. Bouet, I'm lucky that to always welcome as well, not just the female farmer, but also male farmers. So also sometimes I engage, invited families as part of the program in outreaching awareness and actual planting, bringing up the benefit and awareness level to the family of young farmers. This is another project that we did, also in Laos, in Luang Prabang province, but in a different village, so-called Long Lan community. And this has been collaborative, jointly and very helpful. But in fact, Hmong, I don't know if in the Philippines you would have Hmong indigenous group, but Hmong indigenous group collaborate here with more local officials. So over the years, we are observing now, not just the local people doing it alone. Now we see further is the extension to the awareness of local officials, local departments at commune level, district level, and provincial level. So this is a project that we engage and we receive support from officials at different level quite massively, and we were really happy about it. From one project to another project, continuously just reporting you and sharing with you that I continue extending to further smallholders effort. So educating from making a little nursery to a bigger nursery, to tree planting from one plot level to a bigger plot level on the landscape. This is a project in the northern Vietnam. If some of you have been to Lao Cai, it looks not nice, but it was a genuine effort also coming from young farmers in Lao Cai and northern landscape of Vietnam, which is extremely difficult life for most of the people. Harsh weather, extremely cold, accessibility to resources, to infrastructure was very limited, but we try to mobilize support directly to the young farmers group there, and also doing exactly the same kind of thematic activities for restoration and seedlings. Recently, I also mobilized in a different village, which is apparently in May. Now we are in June, right? In May? No, we're in May. This is a village where there are Catholic religious followers, but they are located in central highland of Vietnam. Also a region very difficult livelihood. But luckily, now the ongoing effort is to they themselves organize activity from land clearance, land preparation, setting up the whole nursery so-called facility. You got the pole, you got the shading material, and there are ongoing collecting seeds as well, everybody, from the forest, and try to bring it back here from potting bags to make into a proper trees, proper seedlings for further planting in the future. So this is just a few images from practical work that we try to do at very field and very grassroots level, engaging everybody, farmer, yeah, through community, trying to restore what possibly we could do, and going forward. In this slide is our other project. We have been supported by a very small, by an organization based in Germany, and you may like to approach, named Nature Life International. Nature Life International Germany used to support, I couldn't remember the name in the Philippines, but in Cebu, no, it's the University of Visaya. Yeah, University of Visaya, I think, yeah. But the idea from restoration or reforestation with indigenous species, we also learn from the Philippines back in the olden days. Huh? And now this initiative, we're focusing on these indigenous forestry of a variety like Melia azadara, Michelia tonkinensis, and there's also some acacia. But now the message is we're no longer going in monocrop kind of culture, but it is shifting the landscape into a mixed species planting type of landscape. Just simply some effort ongoing. Very recently, by this month or last month, I would end up here just overviewing the sharing. I'm not quite an expert, but as an enthusiastic activist, so we see the challenge, we try to mobilize what we can do in action, and my dream is we can take action from individual level farmers, rich, through to a huge and better, higher level. Over the years, in my last 7 to 10 years interaction, we have come up with this. I just want to show you one thing. So, Dr. Bruet, we have managed to also, in documentation, this is something to share with the Philippines. We have developed into this nicely web page. And web page acknowledge also Satuyama initiative, and the Nature Life International would give us, I don't think money is important, but that lens, that vision, yeah, and that idea in how we're going forward for restoration. And in this interesting website, and I have registered it as the mixedspeciesplanting.org. I also have document all the little projects that we are going to in the pipeline, what we are currently doing, and those that are already finished by documentation purpose. And additionally, for HEPA, Dr. Buet, what can be proved? Nothing can prove, but we just work, yeah? We can work ourselves. So what I try to do, and this is what I have recently done, if you're looking at As Dr. Buat introduced earlier, I work also partly dedicate my time for HEPA. If I boundary all the area for HEPA, that in almost like a polygon line here, of that pinky, over the years, there's a satellite image from Landsat 5, 2005, we see a different kind of coverage. But over the years, what we see now is going much better, improved, and only for satellite purpose. Detailed data goes later. But almost now by 2021 or 2022, our forest enhance also carbon assessment from that entire landscape of HEPA has significantly improved. And that indicate thanks to the consistent and persistent effort from not just us, but everybody involved in this restoration journey. I thank you very much for your listening, and I look forward to hearing questions and or exchange.
To elaborate more on the webinar topic, we will now proceed with the discussion.
Our discussant is an assistant professor at the Environmental Biology Division, Institute of Biological Sciences, University of the Philippines, Las Bañas. He obtained his Bachelor of Science in Biology, in Plant Biology, and graduated cum laude at UP Las Bañas in 2008. He took his Master's in Environmental Science, also at UPLB, and graduated in 2014. He has a wide array of research interests, including plant ecology, vegetation science, and landscape ecology. He is also an affiliate faculty at UP Open University, teaching the principles and applications of landscape ecology. He is currently active in many research initiatives concerning sustainable development, climate resilience, and biodiversity conservation. Ladies and gentlemen, let us give a warm virtual clap to Assistant Professor Mark Anthony F. Rabena.
So upon hearing the interesting presentation from Kien Dang, I was supposed to change the title instead of ecological. Maybe I'm focusing on the socio-ecological context of landscape restoration, because as we have listened to the presentation, the landscape restoration practice per se entails the participation and engagement of local communities or even other members of the society. But for the sake of our discussion, I'll stick with the initial idea of looking at the ecological context, and then later on I'll try to include also the other the socio-ecological or the social context of applying or in the practice of restoration at the local or rural landscape or area. So basically, I would like to provide some scientific or especially ecological context about the restoration practice, which will hopefully enable our audience to ask questions. That's basically the purpose of my presentation. So the goal of the presentation. So with that, I would like to have this specific aims to achieve that goal. So first, I will discuss the theoretical background of restoration and also examine the practice of restoration. Maybe you can put context later on why or how the practical aspect done in Vietnam, and basically I will be providing the general framework for it. And then number 3 is, of course, to identify the ecological basis of restoration activities in Vietnam, or maybe for all SEPELs or Satuyama or Satuumi landscapes. So just a basic understanding, maybe an operational definition that we could all agree today, so that later on you could ask questions, right? So yeah, restoration, it's an activity of humans, and if we trace back our history, philosophically we could look at some cultural aspect of it, like there are a lot of local or indigenous groups doing this already. The idea of restoring the area, or in general, in their philosophical language, they use the term managing the land. When they manage the land, more or less, it's similar to what we know now as restoring the land. So our indigenous groups, ethno-scientifically or culturally speaking, we can see this activity already happening before. And later on, if you look at our history, again, it became a societal movement. I don't know if you're familiar with the conservationist Aldo Leopold. So it's a famous conservationist, no, who advanced and even lead to a movement. Okay, not just an activity that is prevalent or even practiced in indigenous groups, but rather he made it a mainstream idea. So that's why from a societal movement, later on, our SNT community also led to its formulation of concepts or even definition of terms. Like when we say restoration, we are actually using the word ecological restoration. So that means if we look at the agreed definition that we have now somehow from the Society of Scientists or Practitioners of Restoration, so it's an intentional activity that initiates or accelerates. Sometimes they are now adding the idea of recreate. Okay, but plainly we can look at it as an activity, an intentional activity that initiates or accelerates the recovery of an ecosystem. So take note here that we are using the term ecosystem because in scientific or in ecological perspective, we have this basic unit of understanding our environment through an abstract unit we coined as ecosystem. But yeah, seeing at the presentation of Dr. Dang, so we can also maybe level up this idea of ecosystem to not just a plainly homogeneous area in our environment, but rather looking at distinct patches, or maybe like in the context of a Satoyama. A Satoyama is a collection of different land uses or patches. So maybe an environmental unit that we could restore or that we could accelerate its recovery is at that level where we could see different patches of lands or different land uses in a land. Okay, but yeah, that could be also used in the context of landscape restoration. But the idea is that there is a certain environmental unit, either an ecosystem or a landscape, and we want this to recover from what? So there should be some kind of the idea of disturbance. Okay, so with this concept of ecological disturbance, okay, we want to accelerate its recovery or initiate, or even, as I've said, reintroduce or recreate something, an environmental unit. We want to recreate such unit into a new concrete or discrete idea of nature. But we are looking at, in the end, the health, the overall health, the integrity, the sustainability, the concept of sustainability here will now encompass the not only the natural aspect but also the social aspect of things. Okay, so this is the agreed definition so far. So for all the information that we collate, as we practice or as we do the science of restoration, or if we are doing ecological restoration, we are doing some scientific study about this, detailing the knowledge about it. So we have this restoration science, okay, and also the restoration ecology field. If you're familiar with this one, these are a promising field. I think we have one field here in the Visayas, I think, and also in Baguio, that is mainly in academic sense. You can do the science and you can make some theorizing about the concept so far we have accumulated. Yeah, and this mainly contributed to our body of knowledge in ecology. So that's why restoration ecology can be an ecological field, and at the same time it can also be an environmental science field, because yeah, as you have observed from the presentation of Dr. Dang, there is this human aspect of it. So not just like the natural science or the vegetation or the biology of it, but also there's this politics, there's this social aspect of it that we need to integrate so that we could have a meaningful information about the ecological restoration that we coined scientifically. Now, these are the practice of ecological restoration. So maybe you can go back to the presentation and okay, this is what they supposed to apply somehow. If you practice ecological restoration, you do assessing the sites. So you look at the current conditions. So a practitioner must know what's the climate, what's the soil conditions in that area. Okay, and also the vegetation that is present there, and also the disturbances that are present in there. So you need to take note of this natural, and at the same time, if we are looking at that unit as a socio-ecological landscape, then also we need to consider the people that are in there. Are there indigenous peoples in there, or do we have like private companies interacting with these units, and so on and so forth. So yeah, very important. We observe the formulation of project goals and also our key actions. So that's very important in restoration activities. So very plainly mentioned from our presentation, we saw the key actions that they have identified, because of course to be more successful in doing restoration works, you need to set goals and at the same time identify the key actions that you need to achieve with the limited financial resources as well. So it entails some money, of course, and then to achieve such goals, so it should be realistic and of course in line with ecological principles. Okay, so here are some examples, and I hope you can connect with what the project or key actions and goals that our presenter have shared to us today. So we have like revegetation, habitat enhancement, remediation. So what we have observed is tree planting or reforestation activities mainly. So we could ask later on from Doc Kien if what was their main goals, no? So although it was stated a while ago, but you can see here that revegetation is really one of the key goals that restoration activities are anchored to. Okay, so moving forward, you can also look into the removal of disturbance, because if you want to restore, you want to ensure that the disturbance is not present, okay, or somehow it's lessened. Okay, or if you can control that disturbance, then removing such disturbance would allow the process of recovery to proceed. Okay, and then also restoring the processes. Okay, because we don't only restore the structure or the identifiable components of that ecosystem, but also to look into the functional aspects, or maybe in ecology we use the term interactions, or specifically the nutrient cycling, the energy transfer, okay, that is associated with the interaction of the different components of the ecosystem. So if we are to restore the processes, okay, including the disturbance cycles, then maybe, okay, yeah, or ecologically speaking, that would surely lead to the restoration of the site. So that's why restoring these processes or the cycles, for example, natural cycles of things, will eventually lead to restoration. And then we have the rehabilitation of substrates. So basically, we're talking about the soil if we are in the terrestrial environment. Now, for aquatic environment, okay, so there are also restoration in coral reefs or in mangrove areas. So you need to look at also the substrates, okay? If the substrates are rehabilitated, then more or less it will proceed to restoration. And of course, the monitoring and maintenance aspects, as you have learned today, we have they have used the geographic information system or Google tagging as one way of very fast or efficient way of looking at an update on what is happening on the ground. Okay, so these are some of the ecological considerations when you do restoration. There are bases. So basically, we get information from ecology, and then we apply it to the ground, and then we allow the participation of different groups. If it's community-led, then we allow the people to do this or participate in that effort. Otherwise, it could also be a top-down approach, like a government or a political person doing the initiatives, and then having control of the efforts. But mostly restoration entails community-led approach. So yeah, so disturbance, as I've said, in nature, disturbances are part of our environment. So in the Philippines, for example, we are naturally being visited by typhoons. So typhoons should be part of the disturbance regimes. And when we talk at disturbance regimes, we know the patterns of these disturbances. Okay, so do we have fire in the Philippines? Natural fire in the Philippines, for example. In Vietnam, do they have natural fires or wildfires? So that should be noted. Or in that specific area that you're restoring, is this really how frequent is fire, for example, or how frequent is pests outbreak is happening in something like that. So those could possibly included in the restoration. Genetics, this is mainly the basis for like, for example, when you choose indigenous or native species. Okay, now genetics is the main, or population genetics is the main concept here. So local sources are more likely well adapted to the target ecosystem. So if you use local species, so that's why there's an effort to go to the forest and you look for the local species that are present there, because these are more or less adapted. They have acquired genes, no, so that these genes will match more or less with the environment, so that when you plant this specific species to that target ecosystem, it will most likely, it has high probability of survival. Okay, so succession, I hope you also need to consider this, because naturally, if you allow a certain area, no, if you allow a certain area to develop, okay, or actually in a given environmental unit, okay, if you just allow it to develop on its own, you can see a pattern, no, of how this environmental unit changed through time. Okay, it changed through time actually. So it's very specific to a site or to a location in terms of pattern. What are the sequential patterns of species, for example, that that arise from such specific disturbed site? So, for example, if that specific site was disturbed by a fire or through a immune system, okay, if fire is the disturbance, then if you allow nature to proceed to itself and allow succession to proceed, then there should be a documentation, okay, on what species that are usually sprouting or occurring, thriving from a freshly burned or maybe a few days or weeks burned area. Okay, what are those species that usually emerge? Okay, and then after that, if you allow some more time if you allow some more time for that environmental unit to develop, then you can see a pattern like there's certain species of herbaceous that will come out, and then you will have the shrubs and even the woody plants and the trees, for example. So sometimes this is mainly used in tree planting, that they have to identify specific species that is at that what level of ecological succession will it fit in to that specific area. Okay, so yeah, that's one application of succession to restoration. We have also community assembly theory, the second to the last that I will share it to you. So it suggests that similar sites, no, can develop different biological communities depending on order of arrival of different species. So imagine this, you might be frustrated looking for, or maybe frustrated with the survival rate of your species, but in this location it's surviving, but in the other area it's not surviving. Why? So this is expected in some restoration works, because not all sites, although they are similar, but if you look at to the environment, okay, the overall landscape, okay, so this could also have an effect, okay, on which species or on the survival rate of this species. And finally, landscape ecology. So we're looking at the heterogeneity, no, or the different patches of land uses or vegetation in a given area. So what you are restoring possibly could be just a patch, okay, that is on the background. It's it's a patch of land in a background made up of agricultural area. So how would you restore such patch of land, which if you look at the background, it's also made up of agricultural area. So you are creating an island actually, and if you're creating that island, what would you expect to each species? So if we adopt or borrow the concept of island biogeography theory, then we could have an idea of like what land area or what size of this patch could be adopted in such a way that there is this highly success in ensuring restoration in a given area. And sometimes the concept of connectivity is being used, like you are restoring a certain area of land by actually adapting or borrowing the concept of connectivity. You're putting a connection of different patches such that the exchange of individuals will be facilitated and ensuring success also of restoration. So there will be more species thriving and even increase in species diversity, for example, if we have higher connectivity of these patches. So something like that. Okay, so if that's the idea or framework that we could adopt, no, it would be interesting to ask our speaker some questions about the natural ecosystem or specific vegetation types that they are restoring. In Vietnam, for example, what is the natural vegetation cover, or what is the natural characteristics mostly of those areas that they are restoring? So what are the common disturbance, or all mainly anthropogenic, because we listen to kaingin and also agricultural disturbances. How about disturbance regimes related to natural aspects? Okay. Now for the restoration goals, so we have seen short-term or long-term goal. You might be asking some more specific questions about that, and also the ecological basis of their restorations, like they choose the options. So how did they choose indigenous tree species when they were looking into in a practical sense, when they were looking for the appropriate species? No, how did they do this? No, and in terms of number of planted trees, okay, how did they decide on the number of trees that they will plant on a given area? Did they look into the biological aspect, or mainly restraints from socio-ecological or social component? The mixed planting idea is very interesting because, yeah, in genetics, we know that if there are more species or higher diversity, then there is higher integrity of that specific ecological integrity of that specific area. So the combination is better now that we can perceive that combination of species is better than monocropping. So that's why this advocacy or this decision of converting monocrop plantation to mixed planting is beneficial, not only ecologically, but as we have observed, there are species added in the mixed planting method, species that are actually beneficial to the beneficiaries or to the farmers who are actually doing the restoration work. So it's a mix of ecological and social aspect. Yeah. So now it could be interesting to ask some practical questions about the successes and challenges from the community-led approach, because the communities are the mainly involved in doing the restoration. So he mentioned about nursery capacity building, okay, or engagement of youths, okay, or also farmers and indigenous peoples. Yeah, that's it. That's my take, and I hope this framework or this added information could also help you process the presentation, and even, of course, hopefully would allow you to ask more questions from our audience. Thank you so much.